Alright, Wildcard, we'll hit our last little story here. Daryl Mitchell, Northern District's Knights all-rounder, moving to Canterbury, which seems like a lifestyle decision. And that's fine. As far as Daryl Mitchell going to Canterbury and how he fits into the Canterbury team, I think there is a bit of an opening. Like Canterbury, I think Stephen Murdoch retired, so they've lost a batsman there. They've got a fairly young batting group, and Daryl Mitchell will fit into that. They don't really have because Andrew Ellis retired as well, so now they don't really have a seam bowling all-rounder. So effective, like Andrew Ellis didn't play a lot of cricket, like didn't play all formats in last summer or last few summers. So I think Daryl Mitchell is filling that role. Seamer, who can bat as well. And then thinking just with the pandemic impact, maybe some of the Black Caps are going to be playing more domestic cricket, which would be great. And there's not much room for Daryl Mitchell, apparently, in Northern Districts Knights. I just think this is purely I don't really think this is a cricketing decision. I think it's just a lifestyle decision. With young family partners from Canterbury and whatnot, and it just suits his, needs and wants at this time. How do you think this will be good for Mitchell? Like, Mitchell climbed through the ranks to make a Black Caps Test debut while he was at the Knights, and I don't know how much of that is due to the Knights. I don't know how much of that is due to Daryl Mitchell's, skill and perseverance and all that. But there is, so how do you view this move for Daryl Mitchell? And I would suggest, because John Bracewell is no longer the coach of the Knights advertised their head coaching role for the Northern Districts Knights. So there is a bit of change coming with the Knights. They also had Gareth Hopkins as their T20 coach, and I think they finished last in the Super Smash off the top of my head. So I think the Knights actually finished last in 2 competitions, Super Smash and Ford Trophy maybe, or Super Smash and Plunket Shield. So there is that factor. How do you view this move for Mitchell? Like, do you think it's going to blast him into further up the pecking order with the Black Caps, or do you think it's one of those moves where, from a cricketing perspective, it kind of puts a limit on your potential? Like, how do you just assess that?
Well, I tell you what, I mean, I didn't know the stuff about his partner being from the region or things like that, which does suggest lifestyle, yeah, for sure. Like, it's certainly a big part, but at the same time, I don't think it would have to be. Like, I think if you because those things are true, then it probably means that's your major factor involved here. But at the same time, this could be purely a cricketing decision, and I think it would be, to be honest, an absolutely brilliant one for him. I think this is you've seen a fair few Black Caps moving around different regions in recent years. Generally, it's the trend of them going to Northern Districts, not away from Northern Districts. So I think it's pretty, or if not there, it's to bloody Auckland, who've signed a couple. Like, you think of Kyle Jamieson going from Canterbury to Auckland at a time when he was pushing through trying to get to Black Caps status. And Daryl Mitchell is already at Black Cap status, but he's stuck behind Colin de Gronholm in the pecking order of the Test stuff. He's could play alongside de Gronholm in 2020 stuff, but he probably needs to just amp up his case a little bit more. Don't think he's played any ODI cricket, but it is a possibility down the line. I think Canterbury is dead set perfect for him. This is a genuinely exciting transfer. I don't think it'll halt him in any way, because when he playing for Northern Districts, he's a dude who came up with them. That's a bit different than signing with Canterbury. Canterbury know they've signed a Black Caps player, so they're gonna hold him in a different kind of light. Like you said, Andy Ellis has just retired. He has been phasing out his cricket for the last couple of years, but for the last decade, Andy Ellis has been one of the best performers across all formats, really, for Canterbury, in a role which Daryl Mitchell is going to do that exact, like, it's a perfect mold for him to just slide straight in. Like, the role is already there for him with this team. He gets to go in with a lot of, like, you know, quite a few young fellas around him where he gets to be a leader, and we know he's a guy who has some leadership capabilities, because I think he's done some captaining with some of the New Zealand A sides and stuff in the past, hasn't he? I think he might have captained ND a few times as well. I think that's true. So it's just like, in terms of everything, and this also puts the pressure on de Gronholm, where he's not competing with him for places in Northern Districts, he's competing with him for Black Caps places. And de Gronholm is a guy who can be a bit inconsistent. We know his 2020 stuff from what, like, some of the stuff both of us have been writing over recent times, not great. Like, he's been pretty, he's a little bit vulnerable in that position, and that position is mostly as a batsman, so it's a little bit of a different thing to what Mitchell would be looking at. But we know that, like, when de Gronholm missed the test against England, Mitchell came in for test debut. Like, that's a specific role as that sort of seam bowling all-rounder in the test team. If Mitchell wants that role, he has to take it off de Gronholm. Like, they're like for like there. It just seems like this is a situation which in all aspects suits Daryl Mitchell down to the bloody floor, and that's exciting, because that's the kind of situation, therefore, which should get the best out of him, get the best out of him. It's going to demand the best out of de Gronholm, get the best out of de Gronholm. Everything, like, everyone wins, you know. It's just one of those situations where it just seems like everything's dispersed in the right kind of way to where, like, let the best man win kind of thing. And at the very least, Canterbury have signed a very dependable, reliable player across all three formats who can do a lot of good things for them. So it's yeah, I bloody love this move. I think it's great on basically all levels.
It does set up a fascinating battle for the seam bowling all-rounder spot, because you mentioned Con de Gronholm, Jimmy Neesham might be a factor. I don't want to put Kyle Jamieson in that bracket just yet, but he definitely showed us that he can bat, and he definitely showed us that he can bowl. So, like, he's an up-and-comer coming into that equation. I'm just thinking, like, seam bowling all-rounders, you've got Colin de Gronholm with the Knights, maybe Corey Anderson barely plays domestic cricket, so I don't really want to categorise him with these folk who are actually playing. Auckland Aces maybe have Kyle Jamieson. CD Staggs, the best I can think of there is Willem Luddick, who hasn't scored a whole lot of runs recently. One of the best seamers in the Plunkett Shield. Obviously, the Wellington Firebirds, they got the big dog Jimmy Neesham. Otago Volts have Nathan Smith, who is someone to watch out for, and then Canterbury coming in with Daryl Mitchell. So it's from that perspective, it's definitely a three-pronged race, three-headed beast. You got Daryl Mitchell, Colin de Gronholm, and Jimmy Neesham. And then maybe Kyle Jamieson and, to a lesser extent, Nathan Smith, trying to factor into that. It also sets up like you mentioned, Daryl Mitchell replacing Colin de Gronholm. Like for like, horses for horses and all that shit. I wonder, so you've got that battle. You've got the battle of the seam bowling all-rounders. I wonder about not so much the battle between seam bowling all-rounders and spin bowling all-rounders, but the dynamic and the tension between seam bowling all-rounders and spin bowling all-rounders, because I think you've got some very good spin bowling all-rounders in Aotearoa as well. The likes of, not necessarily dominant, oh my God, he's in the Black Caps every game, or he's going to be a Black Cap every game, but as we've alluded to, like, you've got a lot of the best spinners were, spin bowling all-rounders. Guys like Dean Foxcroft, guys like Brad Schmullian, guys like Mitchell Santner, Michael Bracewell, Rachin Ravindra. Like, a lot of these up-and-coming cricketers, Glenn Phillips can fucking bowl these days. Like, there's so many good, talented cricketers who bat and also bowl. Like, you can get a couple of overs maybe if they're, like, I don't want to say Glenn Phillips is going to be an international spinner. Let's talk more about a domestic level. So all these dudes can be counted on to bowl domestic overs as spin. So that presents a situation where it's it might be less about like, are you a seamer or a spinner? It's more about, okay, you score lots of runs, you're a quality batsman, and regardless of what you bowl, I can get 5 overs out of you, in a Plunkett Shield game. So I think as far as the seam bowling all-rounders go, it's Neesham, de Grandhomme, and Mitchell. They're competing, and pretty much across all formats they're competing because they all whack the ball very hard in T20 cricket, and they've shown at various points that they can bat in Test cricket as well and do a job with the ball if called upon. But there's also a lot of talent in the spin bowling batsman department. So it's less about like what kind of bowling are you going to do, and more about who gives me the most effective bowling option, whether it's seam or spin. And I think that's a very interesting dynamic in Aotearoa cricket right now.
And that's the way it should be too, eh? Like it doesn't matter what you're bowling, it's just how well you're bowling. And there's perhaps one of those criticisms of the Black Caps. Maybe it's maybe not quite as bad at the moment as it has been a couple years ago, maybe, is that they're just a little too rigid in terms of the roles. They're picking players for roles rather than picking players for the players that they are, which was a very, very Brendan McCullum thing. And then you saw afterwards, like, for example, the amount of players that, I think of Luke Ronke at the Champions Trophy, first of all, being picked to be Brendan McCullum. Like just pushed into open and saying like, you be Brendan McCullum, give us that pinch hitting thing. It's like, well, it doesn't work unless you've got Brendan McCullum kind of thing. Like, and the irony is that Brendan McCullum is the first dude who'd be out there saying like, pick players to play to their strengths, do what, like, trust your own game, trust what got you to this point, those kind of things, rather than changing things up there. And there's no reason why, I mean, there's the obvious one when we're talking about this is picking Mitchell Santner as an all-rounder for as long as they did, without him getting the success with the bat. And when he finally did score 100, it was right as his bowling was finally like running out of patience in terms of the wicket take and stuff. So they have now presumably the number one spinner, and it seems like this is beyond doubt, like this is basically confirmed at this point. Number one test spinner is Ajaz Patel, who is not a bunny with the bat, but he's probably batting at 10 with Bolt at 11 in the situation. So that does maybe put a little more pressure on an all-rounder, and Colin de Grandhomme can be rocks or diamonds, which is what you love about Colin de Grandhomme. That's why he's batting in that role. But yeah, no, it's an interesting one to keep an eye on, isn't it? How these different fellas just sort of strike the balance, I suppose. Plus, let's not also, it would be remiss of me by past reputation not to mention the fact that moving to Canterbury also puts him in Gary Stead's region, for Daryl Mitchell's case at least. And I'm not suggesting there would be any kind of bias in terms of selections or anything like that, but it doesn't hurt his case. I have actually gone kind of the opposite. Like, I've liked to joke about that in the past, but people have actually been saying that in public, that there's a sort of Canterbury versus ND thing dynamic going on, and that's actually driven me a little bit crazy to where I feel like I can't really. My jokes have been spoilt in that regard, because I don't actually think there's anything going on there, which makes that whole thing very weird and just generally strange. But that's probably one we don't need to get into.
If that was the case, why the fuck would anyone move from the Knights to Gary Stead? Because you're essentially moving from Kane Williamson to Gary Stead.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, if you've come up, like, Daryl Mitchell, he's Waikato to the bone. Like, he did spend time growing up in Australia, but he also, when his father was playing for Waikato and coaching, he was in the Waikato region. So he is Northern Districts, like, hard out. So he came up playing, not necessarily came up, but like when he was coming through the Knights, he would have played a shitload of cricket with Kane Williamson and all those other Black Caps as well. So, like, according to this Black Cap split stuff, you've got someone who has played a lot of cricket with Kane Williamson in the same team as Kane Williamson, the same association and province as Kane Williamson, and he's moving to the dark side. He's moving to Gary Stead's team. Like, it doesn't make any sense at all. Like, the drama doesn't make any sense at all. It's I'm glad you highlighted that one, Wildcard, and I think that's a nice place for us to wrap this up.